How y'all doing? It's great to see you. I woke up, I heard the government was shut down. I said, that's not going to shut me down. I grew up in Buffalo, New York. We call this weather a hiccup. And so the notion that the government shutdown was going to have anything to do with what I was doing today wasn't going to happen. And so I want to say thank you for the invite. Thank you for the great work you've done. I got an email from a friend of mine late last night, the U.S. attorney from North Carolina. She met a few Indiana folks. Anyone here from Indiana? You bought her a drink, I think. She told me to tell you thank you. And she said you were really nice folk, like the ones she has at home in her neighborhood. So I want you to know that. And I want to really say, Harold, thank you for all of your leadership. This person, there are a few people that I've met in my career who have stood up for more people for longer than you have. And it is an honor to be here today with you, Harold, and talk about the challenges confronting not only your union, our union, but challenges confronting working people across the nation. You know this already, but it bears repeating. Your leadership team is fantastic. The work that they do day in and day out. Jeff Buttle was with us last week at the White House when the president was talking about an overtime rule, and I'm going to get back to that. I've been in foxholes with many of you in Montgomery County, Maryland. I remember vividly, I had the privilege of serving on the county council, and one of the most important bills we passed was a bill to unify the fire and rescue service. And I spent a lot of time riding along with you, spending time at the station, listening and learning from you, and growing that appreciation firsthand. Because, you know, once a local elected official, always a local elected official. And I learned so much from those days. And so part of the reason I am here is to say thank you. Thank you for everything you do across this nation. You are all too frequently not appreciated, because people say we love our firefighters and we thank you for your service, but actions speak louder than words. And in these tough times recently, you've all too frequently taken it on the chin. Whether it's budget cuts, whether it's pension insecurity, and I look to my left over here, and I see that, protecting our pensions. I see what happened in Vallejo and other places across the country, and I realize that the work that you're doing day in and day out, we need to reward it not simply by our platitudes, but by our actions. And that's what we should always be judged on, is our actions. And I have always asked people to judge me by my actions. And I want to talk to you about some of the actions that we have taken and will continue to take. But I want to say thank you at the outset, because you have done so much for so many people, risking your lives day in and day out during very, very, very challenging times. We have 17,000 plus people at the Department of Labor. I'm very proud of the great work that everybody does at the Department of Labor. But I'm equally aware of the fact that when my phone rings or my BlackBerry buzzes, my life is not on the line, unlike all of you. And that is why it is so important for us to have your back, because you have our back every single day of the week. The notion that a federal shutdown, all that means for you is more work, because there's people who left their car on to get warm, and then you got a carbon monoxide issue. There's other people who've gotten in accidents. There's explosions, things of that nature. A day like this is a day where some people are not working. It's a day where you're working harder. And that's why, in a way, it's really remarkably appropriate for me to be here talking to you about what we're up to. And it was such an honor last Labor Day when I got to go to Fairfax and meet with Captain Nemec and the other folks, the remarkably talented men and women down there. I met a number of folks who were former veterans, and we talked a lot about how their veteran service is such a great preparation for the work that you're doing in the fire and rescue service. And I gained a remarkable appreciation for the sophisticated state-of-the-art equipment. And I gained a remarkable appreciation for the important role that the federal government has played but must continue to play. Because I look at the fiscal 14 budget and I see, there's $680 million in there, But I'm also well aware that there used to be as much as $810 million in there. And so when we talk about austerity and we talk about actions, this president believes that we got to grow the economy from the middle out. We've got to invest in our state and local governments. Here's one of the remarkable statistics about our recovery from this recession. We've now had 48 consecutive months of private sector job growth to the tune of 8.7 million jobs. But at the same time, we have lost over 600,000 jobs in government. And where is the bulk of that job loss? The bulk of that job loss is in local government. School teachers, firefighters, police officers. This is the first recovery from a recession in modern history in which we did not see jobs in the public sector also grow. If our jobs had simply remained flat, so we didn't lose those 600,000 jobs, mostly in local government where you are serving day in and day out, our unemployment rate would be even lower. We'd be closer to 6% instead of the 6.7% we see. And so when I talk about actions and I talk about commitments, austerity has had consequences. And I don't need to tell you all that because you live it day in and day out. Vallejo was able to come back somewhat. And it was able to come back on the strength in part of some of those grants. These grants that we need to be investing more in, not simply in this one-size-fits-all sequestration austerity universe saying, no, we can't help. I talk to my friends in local government all the time, and they are suffering. The number of fires, the number of requests for paramedic service continues to rise. The number of challenges, whether it's West Texas or whether it's East Harlem, continue to tax the resources of departments across this country. But this singular focus on austerity is making your job harder. And I want to make sure you know that when I say we have your back, we are going to continue to fight to make sure these grant programs are there for you so that they can sustain the investments that you need to be state of the art. When I was there in Fairfax, looking at the equipment, seeing the evolution from these 12-inch thick books to now technology telling you how to do your job, it's remarkable. And we need to continue to stay ahead of the curve. And that is why we will have your back. And we will continue to have your back. And we're going to have your back on other contexts. Because, the thing I remember most, Harold, about the conversations I had, and I had lunch there after I got the tour, was I had a conversation with the men and women in Fairfax. And I've had this conversation with other remarkable people about the following question. What does opportunity mean for working people in the 21st century? What did that mean? And we were talking about a number of critical items. Many of your men and women were talking about what is the future going to be like for my son or daughter? And we were also talking about what can we do today? What is the federal government doing today to ensure opportunity for working people? Well, I'll tell you where it starts. It starts with ensuring the right to collective bargaining in the year 2013. I'll tell you, one of the reasons I love being here today is because you understand that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. You're not simply fighting for the rights of firefighters. You're not simply fighting for the rights of your union members. You understood in Wisconsin that when they introduce a bill that has a carve-out for police and fire, that's not enough because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So who was there leading the charge? It was folks like you, Mr. Mitchell, other people, this gentleman to my right. So many people in Wisconsin said, yeah, you've carved me out, but I am my brother's keeper, my sister's keeper. And when you do an injustice to them, you do an injustice to me. That's why collective bargaining is so important. You look at the salaries. We just had salary release from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. People who are working in unions, they're making $950 a week. If you're not in a union, you're making $750 a week. A $200 difference in the median salary, and that doesn't take into account benefits. You read yesterday's Washington Post, and there's a very tragic story about a group of folks trying to organize down in Tennessee and Mississippi. They're in the auto industry. They're contractors making $10 an hour. They focused on one person who's got all sorts of physical ailments, but he's scared to take a day off because he's not sure he'll be allowed back in if he takes a day off, even though he's hurting. That's not America. And that is why the health of the middle class and the health of labor movements and the importance of collective bargaining, there's not correlation there, there's causation there. That's why you will continue in this president and in this labor secretary to have people who are going to fight for the right of collective bargaining, because I recognize that the whole is better than the sum of the parts. And when we fight together, when we recognize that there are 18 states that don't have these collective bargaining rights. And as one firefighter said to me 3 days ago, especially in those states, the Fair Labor Standards Act is what he called the Magna Carta. And I want to make sure you know that we guard that Fair Labor Standard Act very, very carefully. And when issues like overtime came up, in 2011, in the Mullins case in New York. It was a case involving police officers, but you know that the next target would have been firefighters. And when there were efforts to say that police sergeants weren't entitled to overtime, we wrote a brief and we advocated for you. We advocated for police officers. We advocated for other people who were working hard and weren't getting the pay they deserved, and the court agreed with us. That's what fighting for you is about. It's about putting your money where your mouth is, where your brief is, making sure we do things like that. We did that in 2011. We did that last week when the president announced that he's directing me and the Department of Labor to do updated regulations on the issue of overtime. Because I'll tell you, we saw it in the Mullins case, and we see it in the case of people who are managers at the dollar store, at the McDonald's, at the Dunkin' Donuts, people who are working 70 hours a week but really getting paid for 40 because they're making $455 a week. And as a result of a loophole that was written into the law, written into a regulation in 2004 by the Bush administration, quite literally somebody can work 1% of their time, 1%. There's a case out of South Carolina, 1% on management issues, 99% stacking the shelves and doing other work that has nothing to do with management, and you are considered a manager, and you are no longer entitled to overtime. I think that's wrong. The president thinks that's wrong. When the Fair Labor Standards Act was passed, one of the principal notions of it is if you work more than a 40-hour week, you should be paid time and a half. And that has been an article of faith. But that regulation in 2004 has eroded that article of faith. And I met a gentleman last week at the White House event who came all the way up from Texas. He's working 90 hours a week. 90. I asked him where he slept. He said in his truck. He's making $48,000 a year, but I did the math. You do the math, that ain't very good when you're working 90 hours a week. And I meet another person who's working 60 hours a week at a fast food restaurant. They told her she was making $10 an hour. But when you divide 60 hours into $455 a week, now I went to law school because I'm not very good at math, but that ain't $10 an hour, okay? And that's what's happening. And so whether it is happening to firefighters and police officers, as we argued in the Mullins case, or whether it's happening to others, that is not fair. And we're here to fight for fairness. We're here to make sure that the Fair Labor Standards Act is enforced, because you know what? That is the basic protection that you will have. And I will tell you, leadership matters. We recovered $280 million in back wages, the most we've ever recovered. When you have people enforcing the law, it matters for working people. Just a few weeks ago, we settled the largest case on behalf of tipped workers. And maybe some of you have friends who are working at restaurants, relying on tips. Well, we recovered almost $7 million from a restaurant chain in Philadelphia, sports bars. They had 9 of them. Almost $7 million because you know what? They were cheating people out of their tips. Now, why am I talking about that at a conference of the firefighters? Because you have recognized that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. You recognize that in Wisconsin. And in Ohio, when, well, they went after you full bore, the voters spoke on that, recognizing the right to collective bargaining. And that is why when this president came in, there were 300 new investigators added to the Wage and Hour Division to do this work. And in the president's budget for fiscal year 2015, there are 300 more slots for additional wage and hour investigators. So if you're denied overtime, we will take care of it. If other people are denied overtime, we will take care of that. I firmly believe that budgets are moral documents. They reflect the priorities and values of a community, of a government. And that is why these investments are so critically important. So we have your back in that area, and we're going to continue to need your help in this area, because there are some who are going to be arguing that, oh my goodness, if we tackle this overtime issue, it's going to be the end of the world as we know it. This is about fundamental fairness. The president's opportunity agenda is premised on the notion that people who work a fair day ought to be paid a fair wage. Too many people in this country are working a full-time job and living in poverty. Too many people that you know, I am confident, are working harder and falling further behind. And that is wrong. And that is part of the president's agenda to address these issues by making sure that we're enforcing the laws that we have on the books and making sure that we reward work with wages. And if you're working more than 40 hours, you're paid time and a half, as we have been saying for 75 years under the Fair Labor Standards Act. But what else is this opportunity agenda about? It is also about making sure that you have retirement security. You know, I have the privilege of being the chair of the board of the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. Now, this applies to private sector pensions. And so it doesn't apply to public sector pensions. But I will tell you, because some of the work we're doing there is a bellwether of what this president thinks about pension security. A couple of years ago, American Airlines filed for bankruptcy. And one of their goals in filing for bankruptcy was to discharge their pension liabilities. And there were 130,000 people who were going to be affected. And it's conceivable that 130,000 people, you know people. You may have relatives who were potentially affected. And we came in there and we said, no, you can't dump your pensions in bankruptcy. And judge, you should not allow this to happen. And the judge agreed with us. And as a result of that, those 130,000 people were able to keep their pensions and didn't have to take a haircut. All too many times around this country, private sector and public sector alike, pension security is becoming an issue. And that is why we need to continue to fight, and fight hard we will, to make sure that all of the hard work you put in throughout your careers. And I was reading last night in preparation for this, I was reading an article about the 13 most stressful occupations in America. And the first was in the military. And the number one civilian occupation for stress was you know what. And when you do the jobs that you do and put your life on the line every day, you ought to be able to retire with security. And that is why I spend so much time in Detroit right now. And I spend so much time talking to our public sector colleagues about making sure that pension security means pension security. And there are a lot of bills over there in Congress right now that in the name of transparency are actually putting your pension security at risk. And I know you're going to continue to advocate to make sure that that doesn't happen to you, because you have worked too hard to have to sacrifice that. And we will not stand for it in this administration. We stand with you because you've given to us. We need to give to you, not only today and tomorrow, but when you're 60 and 70 and enjoying your retirement. That is something we should be doing day in and day out. And there was another thing, and we talked about this when I was there on Labor Day. We talked about the issue of what are the ways in which we can make sure that the men and women who are putting their lives on the line every day can have the state-of-the-art skills to compete. And what can we do? And I had a remarkable conversation with a number of veterans. What can we do to help more veterans enter the ranks of the Fire and Rescue Service? When I was state labor secretary, I learned that, we do some really stupid things in government sometimes. I met a person who had been a paramedic in Iraq. He had served in a war zone, and he came back to Maryland, and he was being told that, you don't qualify to be a paramedic. And he told me that story, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, you're in a war zone, and you can't come back home and serve your country? And so we changed that. And at a federal level, we're working with states across this country to help in our licensing, because that's not right. You should be able to transition seamlessly into these jobs. And through our Employment and Training Administration, we do a lot of work investing in your human capital. And by the way, this work dates back to the 70s. And I know that because this gentleman to my right educated me about that. 1976. As a result of some help you got from the Department of Labor, back then I had hair, I had no replacement parts, and I was still in high school. And back then, as a result of a grant from the Department of Labor, we were able to work jointly with you on a project to increase racial and ethnic diversity in the ranks of firefighters. And it was a wildly successful program. And so these partnerships to expand your ranks and to ensure that folks reflect the communities that you serve, and to ensure that folks like veterans who have given so much can seamlessly enter the ranks, these are programs that we're continuing today. So for instance, most recently, through our Employment and Training Administration, we have been giving out a number of remarkable grants so that you can make sure, if you are a veteran, that you have the ability to enter the Fire and Rescue Service. We gave out a grant to Missouri in the amount of $20 million so that we can help build that pipeline of firefighters. And we can make sure they have the skills to compete. And we can make sure that they can develop new courses and expand existing courses that will help workers, not just folks returning from the military, but other folks who had lost their jobs, to get that career pathway as a firefighter and paramedic. And so we're continuing to invest, and we will do so for some time to come, because you know what? One of the proudest things that we do at the Department of Labor is through our Employment and Training Service, the work we do. We have a unit dedicated exclusively to helping veterans. Opportunity in America means making sure our veterans have that opportunity as well. And so we're going, when somebody's 6 months away from their release from the military, we are going out there to make sure that folks know about the opportunities that exist, to provide that training, to begin that training while you're still in the military. So if you know somebody who's about to get out, tell them to call us. Tell them to come to one of our 2,500 American Job Centers across this country, because you know what? We owe that to you. And that is why we continue to invest money in this area, because it is so critically important for the work that we do. I want to close on a very personal note, because people wonder, Tom, why do you get so worked up when you're talking about firefighters and the work that y'all do? And part of it is, I was in local government. I was in foxholes with y'all, and I saw what you did day in and day out to protect and serve. And part of it is, quite frankly, very personal for me, because when I was 12 years old, my dad died. He dropped dead in the basement of our house of a heart attack. And I will tell you, it took 3 minutes for the first responders to get there. You never forget something like that. And when our neighbor's house caught on fire, and our neighbor's house was about 15 feet from my bedroom, and you responded in 3 minutes again, you just don't forget those things. You live with them. We're all a function of our own life experiences. Now, notwithstanding the best efforts of the paramedics, my dad didn't make it. Because back then, 1974, they didn't have Lipitor. They didn't have some of the things that they have today. But I will tell you, the knowledge that the professionals who showed up at our home did every single thing that they could is something that is so meaningful for our family. And that is one of the main reasons why I am so grateful. And I see opportunity across this country, and I talk to people, and I see the link between the difficulty of your job right now and the struggles that people are having. I spoke to a family recently, and they're heating their house through their gas stove because they can't afford to pay heat. Now, everyone in this room knows that that is a walking 911 call waiting to happen. But these are the folks who are just doing anything they can to stay warm, to feed their families, to make ends meet. And you see this and you live this day in and day out. And I want to make sure you understand that we're attempting through our actions every single day to, number one, make your job simpler by giving you the tools to succeed. Number two, to make sure your security of your retirement is better. And number three, to make sure that we're building the pipeline of tomorrow. And number four, equally importantly, to make sure that when we go around America, we are expanding opportunity. When we talk about the minimum wage, when we talk about overtime, when we talk about investing in skills, when we talk about enforcing the wage and hour laws, this is about making sure that people that you're seeing every day don't have to turn on the gas stove to heat their family. That's just not America in the 21st century. And, there's kind of this streak I see across America of, we're in trouble, so every person for themselves. Sorry, I can't help you on the minimum wage. Because every person for themselves, notwithstanding all the evidence that shows that when we put money in people's pockets, they spend it, businesses grow, and they hire more people. The studies are legion showing that. And yet there are people out there who are in this, we're all in it alone. Well, that's not what you are. Whether it was Wisconsin, whether it was Ohio, whether it was Montgomery County, Maryland, and Fairfax and Vallejo, everywhere you go, you are in it because you understand that we are community and that, the government is an important catalyst in building and maintaining community. And we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. And through our actions and through our investments in our budgets, we demonstrate that commitment. And it is indeed our actions that I ask you to judge us by. We got a lot of work to do because the opportunity quilt in this nation is fraying. And there are some who want to argue that the solution to that is more austerity. And let's cut food stamps and not give somebody an increase in the minimum wage. Notwithstanding the fact that the people I talk to who are making $8 an hour and $7.25, what they tell me time and time again is, I don't want to be on food stamps. But you know what? I got no choice. Because I'm 35 years old, I'm a mother of two, and the average age of a minimum wage worker is 35. It's not a teenager. And I'm trying to work. I'm trying to feed my kids. I had one person tell me, I'm second generation fast food. I don't want a third generation in my family. And that's what we're trying to do. Invest in people. Invest in you. Invest in community. Making sure that we understand that we are all in this together. And when we fight together, when we work together, when we have shared sacrifice together, it leads to shared prosperity together. We need your help on this. Because Without your voices, and you have one of the most powerful voices, Harold, and you have used it. And you have used it not just for your members, but for our nation, for our community, because nobody should be lighting their gas stove to heat their home. Nobody should be choosing between food and medicine. Nobody should be choosing between a gallon of milk and a gallon of gas. And those are 3 people I have met in the last 3 weeks. And I see this across the country. And then I read that story yesterday in the Washington Post about the guy making $10 an hour, working side by side with folks who are making $18 an hour, but he's a contract employee because it's cheaper to expand your business by hiring contractors and giving them no benefits. We need your help on all of these issues confronting working families. And I know we'll get your help. I was talking to the vice president's folks the other day, and I talked to him a lot because we're doing a lot of work on skills. And when you say the firefighters, it brings a very, very wide smile to his face, because I've only been in a foxhole with you for a couple decades. He's been in a foxhole with you forever. And he is so grateful for your leadership because you embody America. You embody the essence of community. You embody the essence of opportunity. And working together, I am absolutely confident that we will continue to stand up for collective bargaining. We will continue to stand up for working families. We will continue to stand up for unions. We will continue to build America. We will continue to help our veterans. We will continue to secure pensions. We will continue to make progress. We will continue to ensure that a good day's work pays a fair wage. That is what America is about. That's what this president is about. That's what I'm about every single day of my life. And any way in which we can help you, you should let us know. Thank you very much.
All right. Mr. Secretary.